Real honor to have you on our stream tonight. Um, where do we begin with where we are right now? And first of all, tell us your role in all that direct relief does, if you can.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh great, okay. I not used Discord before, so this is my first time. Glad I was able to figure it out.
Yeah,
And thanks everyone. Thank you all for doing this. So I'm the Vice President for Research and Analysis at Direct Relief. So I work on data analysis that's relevant to uh, distribution of humanitarian assistance and understanding where the assistance goes and who benefits from it and what types of events and situations are most likely to cause us to have to distribute aid around the world. So I do a lot of mapping and I do a lot of statistics and other kinds of things like that.
it must be a really complex thing to work out. The logistics of it all.
Yeah, fortunately, figuring out the logistics is not my job. Actually, the we have a pretty talented team that works on understanding how to move medical aid from one part of the world to another. The I think there's a whole lot to it in the sense that understanding kind of what causes us to need to send assistance, how much, what kind, what are the what kind of people are in an area that are likely to require access to medical aid. How is that situation likely to change over time? I mean, a
Hmm.
disaster like a hurricane is something which starts with an acute phase where
Yep.
you have heavy flooding, wind damage. You have people that evacuate. They're often displaced, from their homes for a certain length of time. They may be elderly. They may have disabilities. They may have other things that are kind of pre-existing medical conditions that they then have to manage under conditions where kind of the infrastructure
Hmm.
has been broken, where access to a doctor or hospital, or at least their normal doctor or hospital might be kind of reduced or eliminated altogether. They themselves, depending on the amount of time that they're displaced, might have food security issues. They might not have a whole lot of money to be able to replace things that are lost because of power outage. They might not have access to diabetes medications or respiratory medications. And those things can turn from an acute case to a crisis, a medical crisis, in a relatively short period of time. So,
Yep.
understanding how those phases happen, and then everywhere in the world is different. I mean, we work literally everywhere. And a crisis in southern Bangladesh has characteristics in common with, say, southern Florida, but is obviously quite different in terms of the level of poverty, the type of infrastructure, things like waterborne illness, cholera, typhoid, things that may not be encountered regularly in a place like southern Florida,
Sure.
for one comparison. So we kind of have to track all of that, and then help to make the best decision possible.
And what? Well, tell us if you can an outline of what's happened since the hurricane impacts, particularly with Ian, but also with Fiona as well that you've been covering too, and how it's been progressing then from the initial phase to were we up to now 3 months, 2 or 3 months after the events.
Sure, yeah. So Hurricane Ian, to start with, was a pretty significant initial impact. I mean, it was a Category 4 storm upon landfall. I think it was a tricky storm when it made landfall. It was initially forecast to hit up around the Tampa Bay
Yeah.
area, and then actually hit somewhat farther south. Um, we saw relatively late evacuations from Lee County, Charlotte County, surrounding areas that were impacted by the hurricane. So it ended up being probably the deadliest hurricane in Florida for almost a century, actually. And those kind of initial wave of impacts were a lot of elderly people that either did not or chose not to evacuate their homes. There were a substantial number of drowning deaths, and a pretty especially along the coastal areas, just really dramatic levels of impact on the housing and other infrastructure throughout that whole area. Since then, Florida is a place which actually has pretty large. I mean, people have a difficult time with insurance on their properties, on coastal
Yeah,
properties. On a normal day, this
of
is
course.
shaping up to be probably the most expensive storm impact potentially ever. You're talking about $75 billion potentially worth of insured damages in this area. Some people may not be able to rebuild, or they may need to relocate long term, and so a lot of that is still being sorted out right now. There's although like directly on the coast, there's a number of places where the people have second homes or things like that, but there are working class, relatively poorer communities. As soon as you move inland just a bit, we saw quite a lot of disparity in terms of the degree to which people were able to receive immediate healthcare access and treatment. Race and ethnicity play a certain part in that, so our role is to come in and make sure that we infuse resources into the institutions that kind of do serve the most vulnerable people in those communities on an equitable basis, and make sure that they're if they've lost revenue, that they're not going to that they'll be able to make those revenues up, since the private nonprofit health system operates on a very thin margin on a normal basis, and so you have a number of problems with just making sure that the institutions are able to function effectively long term. And so then, we see people that are in various stages of this kind of transition from chronic to acute crisis, where Florida has a relatively high number of diabetics. We see a relatively high number of people that have hypertension, obesity, other risk factors for a range of chronic illnesses. As you have places that have flood damage, water damage, mold becomes a problem as over time. Mold leads to exacerbation of asthma. That's something kind of extends across all age groups, but making sure that people then have continuous access to things like albuterol inhalers, especially children actually can become really seriously affected by long-term exposure to mold and other particulate as they kind of come back into areas that have been kind of badly impacted, try to rebuild housing, determine what their conditions are going to be for whether they can live there. Do they have to move? Places like people that live in trailer homes and other communities, they tend to be very badly impacted. And also have some of the fewest resources for being able to adapt and kind of make alternate accommodations for their lives. So I think that's largely where things are at the moment. I mean, it's just this extraordinarily large impact. Unfortunately, the media doesn't really cover this tail of the event that
Yes.
well. So whereas we get a lot of attention and a lot of resources when the storm first hits and makes landfall, often the most serious health impacts do happen, as you suggested, in kind of this time frame, where people have been displaced long enough that they're just in a worse position, and things don't change that fast. Things don't reconstruct that fast. So that events like this, the one that you're holding, actually help to just make sure that it stays in consciousness that these are
Yeah.
events that will have a long tail of impacts.
Absolutely, and it just goes to show from your brief there that it goes a lot deeper than just a hurricane impact. So, people who are considering donating tonight, and we really hope that we get as much support as possible, and please keep sharing the event. People watching right now, we've got loads of stuff still coming up, but what actions will they be directly contributing to tonight?
Well, they'll be directly contributing towards being able to ensure that the primary healthcare system, which treats people that are kind of most vulnerable to the types of health impacts that we just described, will get access to medicines over the upcoming months and even years that requires to be able to support people that have been affected by this emergency. So, a large chunk of what direct relief does is to receive medical supply that is tailored to the needs of the population that's been impacted,
Mm-hmm.
and then get that into the hands of the primary healthcare uh, institutions, clinics, doctors, nurses, et cetera, that will be able to provide healthcare directly to impacted people. And so the more support that we're able to muster, the more we're able to support the clinical network on the ground in whether that's southwestern Florida, whether that's Puerto Rico, or whether that's other parts of the world, including Pakistan, that has been severely impacted by flooding, and other areas of the world. So
Yeah.
it's also ensuring continuity of operations. So, like I mentioned before, when an event like this happens, you often see that the responders themselves, the hospitals and health clinics, are themselves badly impacted by this kind of emergency. The staff themselves may be displaced. You may actually have people that are, challenged with getting access to services. So, like, one of direct relief's roles is to ensure that continuity of operations for the primary healthcare system in particular. And then one of the other roles we've been kind of increasingly playing is to help with strengthening just the kind of core infrastructure around the health system. We've been putting, in Puerto Rico in particular, we've been paying a lot of attention to putting solar panels into healthcare clinics, ensuring that people have energy to power their lights, their refrigerators, make sure that the facilities themselves continue to operate. That we don't end up with, Puerto Rico. There's a particular problem with
Yeah.
power loss. During Maria, we saw loss of things like vaccines and insulin. We're seeing a lot less of that now because of the work that's gone into making sure that people have power backups, that they have vaccine quality refrigerators, that they, are just less likely to suffer that kind of huge hit at the acute phase.
Mm.
But there's a lot more work that needs to be done in order to make that a universal condition across the health system. So those are some of the kind of key things that I think people are contributing to when they contribute to direct relief's response to this.
Absolutely. Puerto Rico, of course, a very vulnerable area, and certainly an important job that you're doing regarding healthcare and getting the resources out there and the everything that's needed in those areas after these hurricanes this year. From our team, does anyone have any questions for Andrew right now? Just want to make sure you've got the opportunity here. Don't know if Tim has anything you'd like to say.
No,
Oh,
definitely, Andrew. What you and your team do is an incredible effort. Definitely shows that even after our streams are done and after the cameras are away from these disaster areas, that
yeah.
there is still a lot of work that goes on the ground that we really don't get to see because it's all behind the scenes. And from a personal level, I am just grateful that we have teams like your team in direct relief that do the recovery efforts behind the scenes that we don't really get to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to put it, actually, that it happens a little bit behind the scenes and it happens on a day-to-day basis. I mean, a lot of times it's actually before the disaster happens as well. I mean, we found that disaster preparedness is one of the most important, but often least well-funded areas in terms of access to healthcare, making sure that before crisis happens, that people are supplied with access to medicines, that we have stronger health systems that are then able to swing into action when crisis hits. I mean, this seems like there's a continuity of this effort where before disaster, we need to focus on building stronger systems. There's an acute phase, which is about being able to be very precise and very knowledgeable about where crisis is happening. And then, there's a long-term recovery phase that often doesn't get a lot of media attention, but which is about at least bringing things back to baseline, if not, kind of better than it was before. So all of that kind of work has to kind of go hand in hand in some ways. Yeah.
Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today on a Sunday, no less. Are you actually working today?
My dog just someone just came in. But yeah, no problem. I'm happy to. Thank you very much for holding this, and we really appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing. I know Samir is going to be on pretty soon, and he can speak to a lot of other issues that maybe go a little in a different direction than the kinds of things I work on. But yeah, I really what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and we certainly appreciate that. And let's see how well we can do for you today on our Force 13's Force for Good 2022, continuing here in our second hour, and we're about to do Fall Guys, and that's going to be another crazy effort from me and David. Is David with us right now?
I'm here.
Yeah, you're with us? All right, let's see if I can get it loaded on my end, because I've lost it already.
All right. So
what happened last time during Holus Unleashed? It was a bit of a crazy...
Chaotic,
to say the least.
Yeah, so here's what's gonna happen.
Just a minute. Sorry, I just need to let Tim know if I can. Whether it would be possible to make a highlight of that